Hi, Joni here. Europe is already at war and we really need to stop ignoring it. That will be the topic of today's video. The title of this video might seem a bit provocative, but it's not. And you will hopefully understand why after watching this video. We in Europe are already at war, but we can still avoid the full-scale war from spreading outside of Ukraine. But it won't be easy. While I'm filming this video, Russian troops are trying to advance from many directions in Ukraine. And at the same time, Russian drones and missiles keep targeting Ukrainian civilians in cities that are far away from the front line. The Russian Shadow Fleet also keeps cutting underwater cables in Europe. And Russia keeps doing many other sabotage operations, most of which we never hear about. Russia has been at war with Europe for a long time. And if you listen to the Russian media, you will see that they consider us enemies. And they truly believe that they are at war with us. But instead of properly addressing this issue, most of us in Europe prefer to just ignore it because it's more convenient. Most of those who understand how bad the situation is prefer not to think about it. Even among the majority of Europeans who actually support Ukraine, most prefer not to think about the situation. At least not too much. And it's only natural. And there are also many who just don't understand the seriousness of the situation. It makes total sense because it's just much easier not to think about it, and it makes you sad when you do. If you stop ignoring these things, you might also have to do something about it. After the Yugoslav wars, most of Europe has been living in a sort of bubble, thinking that no more wars are going to happen on the European continent. And that was natural, but it was a mistake. Those of you who watch this video from Europe, your country is already at war with Russia, whether you accept it or not. And the issue is that we are at war without wanting to think about it or do anything about it. And it makes us much more vulnerable. And it's time for that to change. Because the longer we will take to admit to ourselves that we are at war, the worse the outcome will be. And the more people will die as a result. First of all, people need to understand that war does not only mean killing each other on the front line. There are many forms of war that Russia forces on us in Europe. Russia is invading Europe by invading Ukrainian territory and sending missiles and drones on Ukrainian civilians every day. Some of those missiles and drones even end up on EU territory from time to time. Soldiers and civilians die in Ukraine every day because Russia chose to invade Ukraine. Russia was not threatened by Ukraine in any way. There is absolutely no legitimacy in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia is just an imperialist state that wanted a complete control over Ukraine. And Russia's war in Ukraine is not just a regional war. By invading Ukraine, Russia is challenging European and Western security. Russia wants to change the whole security architecture in Europe, and it wants to have a say on what Europeans do. Russia sees a big part of Europe as part of its sphere of influence and is ready to use force to force us into accepting it. And it is doing exactly that in Ukraine by invading European territory. Russia is not ready for peace. It is not agreeing to any ceasefire proposal from the US, and it's actually intensifying its attacks instead. Russia is fully backed by several partners. China helps Russia's economy survive, and it also helps it with tech and with circumventing sanctions. China's proxy North Korea sends tons of equipment to Russia but also troops. Russia's proxy Belarus also gives equipment to Russia and allows Russian troops to use its territory. Finally, Iran has also sent a lot of equipment to Russia. The war is not likely to end anytime soon, and it won't go away just because you choose to ignore it. It might actually even spread if you do. It is not far from us. Ukraine is way closer than most of you realize. And if we ignore it, it might spread to other places too. We have had many cases of people trying to warn us about this issue. In Finland, our ex-head of military intelligence, Pekka Toveri, told us that we are at war in 2024. He was heavily criticized for it. People don't want to hear this sad truth. And most people don't understand what war means. War is not only troops advancing on the front line. And Russia is not only waging war against Europe in Ukraine. Russia is also making big moves inside the European Union. Europe is already in a conventional war against Russia, and the part that the EU plays in it is not conventional. Russia is executing hybrid operations of many sorts, including sabotage. It is cutting underwater cables and pipelines. Russia is also breaking in critical infrastructure inside of Europe and trying to sabotage the logistics of aid to Ukraine. It is also trying to scare people. Russia has men on the ground in every European country. They are just waiting for orders to take action. Some of them are Russians and many of them are local trader criminals. And these people are already active. Many of their operations never get talked about or linked to Russia because governments in Europe try to avoid panic. And it is often the right thing to do. But we can't keep ignoring these operations forever. There have also been assassinations and assassination attempts inside the EU. We all remember the Skripal case and the murder in Berlin by Krasikov, who was later exchanged. All of these started well before the full-scale war. Russian cyberattacks are so common that we barely talk about them anymore. And Russian disinformation campaigns are everywhere. Many of them are extremely successful. European people's views on issues such as Eastern Ukraine, separatists, Crimea, NATO expansion, and many others have all been affected by Russian propaganda. These disinformation operations are extremely efficient, and Russians sometimes get caught and banned, like with RT in Europe, but also with Tenet Media in the US. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are many cases that we don't know about. Just look at all the pro-Russian media, influencers, and politicians inside of Europe. There are many of them, and some of them are getting paid to do it. Russia is also waging economic and energy war against Europe. We were lucky to have a mild winter in 2022-2023, but Russia was ready to use its gas supplies to pressure us. And Russia is also making moves around the world to try to overstretch us. Russia is helping Houthis with heating our supply lines, and they are active in many places around the world to benefit but also to make the world less stable. They want to force the West not to focus on Ukraine. They are active in many African countries, in Myanmar, but also in South America. And people need to realize that there is no way back from this, at least not in the short or medium run. Despite what the Trump administration says, and despite what pacifists, useful idiots, traders, and opportunists say, there is no back to normal after the war. At least not for Europe. The war in Ukraine could still last for years, but even if it ended tomorrow, there is no back to normal. No more Nord Stream. No more reliance on Russian energy. It's also important to remember that Russia is in a war economy. Its economic growth depends on that. Russia cannot afford to demobilize after the war in Ukraine. Russian veterans would cause massive chaos in the country. Russia will likely look for more conflicts right after the war in Ukraine. And again, the war in Ukraine is far from over. It's not only Europe that cannot afford to go back to normal. Russia also can't, just for different reasons. And Russia's ambitions don't stop in Ukraine. Russia has claims over many territories, even if none of them are legit. Just listen to what Surkov said in his latest interview in L'Express. He basically reminds everyone that Russia is not done yet, and he claims that only God can decide where Russian borders end. And we also need to listen to Putin and other Russian officials. They say it very clearly. We need to stop ignoring them. Not because we need to accept anything that they say, but because Russia won't stop until we stop it. And on top of all the coward behavior and ignoring, there are also many misunderstandings among Europeans. People have a hard time understanding that it's possible to actually lose a war in Ukraine while still being dangerous for Europe at the same time. Ukraine is a massive country that has been at war for 11 years, and that had 8 years of war to prepare for the full-scale war. Ukraine also inherited massive stocks of Soviet equipment. Those are advantages Ukraine has that most European countries and countries bordering Russia don't have. Georgia, for example, is a country that is way smaller, has less troops and less equipment than Ukraine. It makes it much easier for Russia to invade. The same goes for Baltic states. Without US support, Baltic states become much harder to defend. The US is capable of moving troops to the Baltics during a war, but it's much harder for other European nations. We can also question whether someone like Macron would be ready to start a nuclear war against Russia to defend Narva. And it's also important to remember that Russia, despite its many flaws, has also some advantages over Western armies. Russia is much better at using drones. Only Ukraine is better than Russia at that. No one other than Ukraine in Europe can compete with Russia on this. Russia is also ready to take massive losses that most European countries are not ready to take. We just need to wake up and realize what is going on, and then act based on that. It's going to be really tough because there are many useful idiots, traders, and opportunists who are trying to push Ukraine into a bad deal. And they will be the first ones who will want to get back to normal with Russia after the war ends one day. But Russia will use that time to rearm, strengthen its economy, and get ready for the next war. And the situation is already complicated enough, but you can add to that the threat coming from Russia's partners. China is also a massive threat to Europe in the long run, and Trump could be a threat as well. The situation is just very complicated overall. There are threats coming from many directions. We can't afford to ignore them. The war in Ukraine will last for a while and negotiations will be very important. Europe needs to play a big role in them. And we need to stop focusing on hypothetical post-war peacekeeper scenarios. We need to focus on helping Ukraine now. Talking about post-war peacekeepers sends the wrong message to Russia. It makes it seem like Europe is expecting such a bad deal at the end of the war that Ukraine will need Western peacekeepers to make sure that it doesn't get reinvaded right away. That's not the message we want to send to Russia. That's just projecting weakness, and Europe has been very good at doing that. We are all responsible for it. Us voters and the people we elect. Macron and Starmer need to finally stop focusing on these post-war scenarios, and they need to start making big moves. And that's also the case for Spain, Italy and Germany. But France, Spain and Italy have really been slacking in terms of aid to Ukraine, and it's time to make up for it now. We need to make helping Ukraine now our main focus, and our second focus needs to be rearming Europe as a whole. We need to take this seriously and prepare for the worst possible scenarios. While doing this, we also need to avoid panic because that's exactly what Russia wants. And it's good to remember that Europe is actually making some moves, just not enough. Europe has great potential. We are better than Russia at almost everything. Our economy is way bigger, we have a larger population, our innovation is better, our societies are healthier in every possible way, we are better organized, we have way better values, we have a higher trust in public institutions, we are just better than Russia at almost everything. But our main weakness is that we choose to ignore realities. We need to wake up and step up. We need to help Ukraine more, have bigger armies, more equipment, and we need to become better at using drones. We need to stop ignoring what's going on around us. We just need to take action. We need to pressure Russia much more. We need more and tougher sanctions on Russia. And we need way more aid to Ukraine. We need long-term commitments of military aid, as that is the only way to change Putin's perception of the war. He's convinced that he can outlast us. Long-term commitments are the only way to change his perception. We also need to restart the production of things that we don't produce anymore. That includes air-launched cruise missiles, short and medium-range ballistic missiles. We also need to produce way more air defense systems and interceptors for them. Our governments need to wake up and start working, and we can use coalitions of the willing in cases where traitors are blocking our initiatives. We don't have time to waste. And it's not only our governments. You can help too. You can do that in many ways. You can always vote for the right people and contact your elected officials, and you can always donate to causes that help Ukraine. There are many great organizations that help Ukraine. I personally know the 69th Sniffing Brigade very well. It's a great and very efficient organization. It's probably the organization with the most bang for your buck. We bring trucks, drones and jammers to Ukraine. We have already delivered more than 600 trucks. I'm personally going back in May. There are always several fundraisers going on, and you can look at the link in the description to donate to one of them. The next few years will be very tough for Europe, but we can do it. We just need to stop ignoring what's going on around us, and we need to stop being cowards. Every day we spend ignoring that we are at war with Russia means more dead Ukrainians and a higher potential of the full-scale war spreading to other European countries. We can still avoid the full-scale war from spreading. Let's stop it from happening. What do you think about this? Do you consider it okay to say that Europe is at war? Or should we avoid saying it just to avoid panic? What should we do about it? You know my take on it, but I want to hear yours. Write your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to donate to Ukraine if you can. The link is in the description. That was it for today's video. I hope that you liked it. If you did, please like and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Thank you.